Hey guys, it's JP, and today we're going to take a look at the running form of the fastest woman to run the 10,000 meter race, Almas Ayana. We will be taking a look at the same race where she shattered the 10K world record with a time of 29 minutes and 17.45 seconds. The previous world record had not been broken in over 20 years, and no one was able to get at least 20 seconds close to it. What's even crazier is that she broke it by 14 seconds. In this video, we will take a closer look at Ayana running as she broke the world record and look at different components of her form to see what makes her so fast and efficient. Hopefully, you guys will understand more about running mechanics to improve the way you run as well. Now let's get into the analysis. As always, the first thing we will look at is the time splits to see how she ran this race. So basically, the race started with a pretty quick pace where the leaders went through the first 5,000 meters of the race in a time of 14 minutes and 46 seconds. Now, unlike tactical races, when races start fast, this usually means that the runners are not only looking to win, but to run as fast as possible. However, despite this speed, this was still just under world record pace for the 10,000 meter race. It starts to get more interesting as Ayana goes into the second half of the race. She ends up taking the lead and goes even faster. As the race goes on, she creates a bigger and bigger gap, and she ends up running through the 9,000 meter mark at about 26 minutes and 22 seconds. At this point, she just had to run the last lap in 1 minute and 21 seconds to break the record, but instead, she finishes that lap with a time of 1 minute and 8 seconds, crushing the previous world record. Being able to carry out a negative split like this and finish that strong really emphasizes the amount of determination and drive Ayana has. Now that we were able to get a general idea of how she ran this race, let's take a closer look at her running form. The clip we'll be looking at is during the last lap of the race. This is the only footage I was able to find that best captures her form in a side view. Of course, it would be nice to see how her form changes throughout the race, however, I could not find the full race footage. Anyway, let's take a look at general components of speed, which are step rate and step length. First, let's take a look at her step rate during this lap. She presents with a step rate of 180 steps per minute. Now, does this mean you should be running at this rate as well? It really depends. While some research has supported 180 steps as an average optimal value, it's not everyone's average. In fact, many world records in distance running has been broken at cadences from around 180 steps per minute to about 210 steps per minute. Your ideal step rate would depend on factors like limb length, terrain, and speed. Anyway, back to comparing her step rate to other elite long distance runners in this category, this step rate is pretty average among these runners. What makes her stand out more is her step length. During this clip, based on a few calculations, she presents with a step length of around 1.96 meters. Relative to other runners in this category, she has a pretty long stride. Now usually, many coaches don't want you to focus on taking huge steps during running, as the problem most runners have is overstriding, which is taking too big of a step where the foot lands way too far ahead of the body. That is usually a problem, as that can lead to increased stress on the joints and increased risk of injury. Anyway, I used the descriptor too far ahead of the body for overstriding, as there are ways to increase step length without doing that. This would be influenced by factors like limb length and power generation from the legs as the foot pushes off the ground. Now in Ayana's case, you can't determine whether she is overstriding or not just by looking at numeric values. We would have to take a closer look at her form itself to determine this. As we look at specific aspects of form, let's first take a look at foot landing. Based on the clip, she presents with mid-foot landing. Now what does this do? While forefoot landing typically increases eccentric demands on the calves, and rear foot landing typically increases stress on the knee, landing around the midfoot pretty much is a balance between the two. Anyway, this kind of landing is pretty typical around this pace. What we will take a look at next is where the foot lands in relation to the body. I placed markers here to help see where the foot lands in relation to the body's center of mass. As you can see, Ayana's foot lands farther in front of the body's center of mass compared to other elite runners we have looked at. From this clip, it seems like she is slightly overstriding. Overstriding is not ideal, as severe cases put a lot of stress on the joints, especially the knee, and can also cause a braking mechanism to occur, which could lead to decreased efficiency. In Ayana's case, it is only slight. where it may not impact her speed that much, but landing in this manner does put more stress on the knee. Now, would I say that this could be the cause of her knee injury before? Maybe, but it's definitely not conclusive. Like I said before, this is only one clip of her running during an entire race. For a more definitive answer, we would have to take a look at her running during training, as that is where a huge portion of her running is attributed to. Unfortunately, I don't have access to that kind of footage. Next, we will look at the range of foot movement as it lands on the ground to when it pushes off the ground. Again, I place markers to see the range of this movement more clearly. What sticks out to me during this frame is the hip extension she has during push-off. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, one of the ways to improve stride length effectively is by improving the backside movement of the legs, which she does a great job with. This also indicates that she really utilizes those hips for power production, which is important, especially for faster speeds. Now, we'll move on to looking at the amount of vertical bounce she has as she runs. In Ayana's case, she actually does not present with much vertical bounce at all. This is not a bad thing, as excessive bouncing puts increased stress on the joints, which can lead to an increased risk of injury. While there should always be some vertical movement during running, ways to minimize this are by maintaining a decent step rate, as well as emphasis on pushing off from the ground through the hips versus the quads, which Ayana does a great job of doing. Next, we will move on to looking at her trunk as she pushes off the ground. Now, if you compare her to the male runners we have analyzed in this frame, it may seem like she has excessive arching of the back. However, this trunk posture is pretty common among women who are elite runners. While we are on this frame, let's take a look at the degree of forward tilt of the whole body as she pushes off the ground. You can see that she doesn't really have much of it, but that's perfectly fine. One of the reasons for a slight forward tilt is that it allows for better positioning of the hips to allow for increased hip extension. In Ayana's case, she already has a good amount of it and does not need to extend those hips any more than what is already seen. Now, we'll move on to the arm swing, specifically shoulder movement. I placed markers to see the range of this movement. As you can see, she has good range of shoulder movement, which aids in stabilizing the body by counteracting angular forces produced from the legs. Now let's run this section of the clip, and you can see that her right arm goes up higher than her left. While this is not too much of a big deal, this asymmetry can also hint to step length asymmetry. Theoretically, with a bigger right arm swing, this usually leads to a larger right to left step, which is basically just a bigger left step compared to the right step. Now, I wish I could say I was good enough to see if there is a difference in step length during this clip, but I honestly can't. What is interesting is that if you look at the IAAF biomechanical study for the 10K race during the 2017 World Championships, they actually measured Ayana's step length and showed an average step length difference of negative 0.15 meters. Being a negative value, this means that she had a longer right to left step, which actually correlates to what is seen during the 2016 race we are currently analyzing. One other way to see the impact of asymmetry is to look at the body in a frontal view. Unfortunately, the limited footage we have of this race does not have any good frontal view of her form. As for the cause of the difference in step length, it could be a number of factors. One could be like Usain Bolt, who has scoliosis, which is a structural asymmetry. However, a more common factor that attributes to this is the possibility of injury of one leg. If this is due to the latter, this would mean that she could actually run faster than this, which is absolutely insane. Anyway, let's finally move up to the head. She basically maintains the head in a neutral position. She keeps it relatively stabilized in this position, as you can see as she runs. This is pretty typical among elite runners, as this also aids in maintaining core stability. And by maintaining this stability, this presents excessive movement of the pelvis, which could lead to some energy leakage when the foot pushes off the ground. And that's it for the quick analysis on Ayana as she broke the 10,000 meter world record. What do you guys think about her? Feel free to leave a comment below. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the analysis. If you did, I would love if you shared this video with your friends. Also, I would love to hear your feedback as well as any ideas for future videos. If you have any runners you'd like me to analyze next, please let me know as well. Anyway, as always, thank you for watching.